The campaign opens on the 13th of September, 1643. Waller returns to London after his defeat at Branway Down to impress, amid a parliamentarian manpower shortage, a new army to secure the West Country and Hampshire. And amongst the London boroughs, he's taking every 18 to 50-year-old to march to the drum. And this would be largely made up of river boatmen and reformado officers without a regiment who take lower ranks in order to fill out the manpower within these units. There is a quick power struggle, though, that does develop over the emphasis for the campaigning season in late 1643 and 44. Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, wants to immediately isolate Oxford and therefore secure London, bring the war to a swift, quick close. On the other hand, Waller wants to isolate southern England and therefore place a stranglehold on Bristol, removing the threat of soldiers coming across from Ireland and Wales, and Basinghouse as well. There's also a bit of a personal bent to why Waller wants to fight this way. He wants retribution against Hopton for his defeat at Branway Down as well. So he forms a base at Farnham, and he immediately starts taking outlying towns around Basing, thus protecting his communication links along the A30 between Salisbury and London. But this is immediately put into jeopardy in October when Sir William Ogle takes Winchester for the Royalists. Now, as a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to try and isolate Winchester and hold his position, Waller takes Andover on the 28th of October, thus isolating Winchester. Now, during this toing and throwing, small skirmishing between both sides, more fighting comes to Alton. The second battle, fought on the 2nd of November, 1643, we don't actually know very much about it. It sounds like a beating up action. So Waller coming into Alton to basically harass the Royalist forces in the town. We know he attacked Sir Humphrey Bennet's 500 horse. There is no record anywhere that I can find as to the outcome of that fighting. We can only presume, as Hopton later moves into the town, that Waller is forced back out again. Between the 6th and the 14th of November, Waller then invests Basing, hoping to control the main London road, while also removing the threat of a fifth column in his rear should he go for Winchester. The siege, though, fails due to bad weather and the London train band's mutiny. So much so that during one attempt at storming the house, units in front of them, the London train bands, not recognizing who they are a friendly unit, fire into the back of them and then run away shouting out "home, home." They're pretty unhappy with the fact that they've been in the field for about the last 6 months, away from their homes, away from their businesses. They want to go home. They feel they're being taken advantage of. It's also not helped by the fact that Hopton very quickly is on the scene and he relieves the garrison of the house as well, forcing Waller to fall back on Farnham. Hopton, of course, is not going to take this sitting down, and on the 28th of November, he attempts to try and take Farnham. The fighting, if it had happened, would have happened in the golf course just below Farnham Castle. It ends in a bit of a stalemate. No fighting happens. They stare each other down, and Hopton, now realizing that Waller's not going to be drawn out, not going to be mad enough to campaign throughout the winter season, moves himself into winter quarters. Now, his quarters are going to be stretched over about 30 miles between Odium and Petersfield. Different brigades going into different towns, thus making sure that they can be equally supplied, and he can hold this communication line along the Wey Valley as well. So Hopton's personal brigade is based out of Winchester. Sir John Vavasor's at Alresford, Sir John Berkeley's at Petersfield, and then Sir Jacob Astley's foot and Lord Crawford's horse are going to be based centrally at Alton as well. Now you can see that the dispositions of the Royalist army stretched over about 30 miles. That's not a good thing. Between Winchester and Alton, it's 17 miles. If an assault is made upon the town, any relieving force is not going to get there until the fighting is well and truly over. So that is a big problem. The advantages of putting yourselves and disposing yourself in this manner is that you immediately control accesses to the rivers Wey, Itchen and Test. And by putting himself in these positions, it also threatens Waller's communications to London as well. However, the Royalist army knew full well, that putting themselves into this position, it was a weak position to be in. Colonel Joseph Bamfield relates that on present at the War Council declared his opinion that it was dangerous to divide the army into so many open quarters, while Sir William Wallace remained in one entire body, since he could in one night, as his custom was to march, force any of the nearest to him before the others could be advertised, join, and succor the quarter attacked. This, coming from a very young man, was neglected as of no moment, and it was to their detriment at moving forward that he had such foresight as well. Defences started in earnest. From the 1st of December, Hopton created a series of defended stop lines around Winchester, including Borden, Oliver's Battery, Werwell Priory, and Islington. And such defences, while protecting royalist lines of communication, also protected the potential route into Sussex via Midhurst. Around Alton as well, defences were started, and other potential garrison towns at weak spots in that line, earthworks were put up around them as well to try and mitigate any assault that might be made upon them. Meanwhile, at All Saints Church in Crondall, Parliament had set up an outpost watching the royalist line. From here, Waller's scoutmaster, Colonel John Birch, received news from Cornet Mevin, who was a spy within the Prince of Wales Horse, based in Alton. He gained knowledge of the disposition of Hopton's defences. And as such, Waller decided, being his nature, not fighting by the conventional rules of war, he was going to start picking away at this line to see what Hopton would do. On the 2nd of December, Hopton also advanced into West Sussex, and he immediately takes Arundel after investing it. And by taking Arundel, not only does he gain access to the Weald iron foundries, good for manufacturing shot and cannon, but he also gained control of Sussex as well. And that would be a fertile recruiting ground while also threatening Southampton as well. On the 9th of September, Wallace starts to pick away and see what Hopton's going to do. So his first move is to again beat up Crawford's quarters at Alton, but again he's forced back as well. On the 11th, Colonel Richard Norton, the nephew of Oliver Cromwell, he also moves into Romsey, beats up the royalist quarters there, and by doing this, Hopton is drawn away from Winchester as well. Now, during the fighting at Alton, Sir Humphrey Bennet captured a parliamentarian officer, and under interrogation, the officer provided information that Waller had received recruits from London the previous day. Now, believing this was a sign Waller was mobilising to campaign through the winter season, Hopton struggled to concentrate his forces at Winchester. And indeed, he sent out information and intelligence to Lord Crawford and his second in command, Colonel Richard Bowles at Alton, basically saying, look, you're not in enough strength at Alton. If Waller tries to attempt it, you do not have to hold the town. Pull back to safety, and we'll take the town again at a different time as well. The problem is that intelligence did not get to Crawford until about 11 o'clock the day before the storming of the town. And so naturally, there's only so much he could have actioned as well. Now, as well as this, one of the more amusing tales of the battle is that on the 12th of December, Lord Crawford sent a messenger to Waller, basically asking him to send him a run of sack in return for an ox. Basically, cocky a snooper at Waller. Waller sent the wine, but Crawford refused the ox and challenged Waller instead to fetch it himself. Basically, his version of, you think you're hard enough, come and get it, basically. Now, such an exchange may also have been used by Waller to basically scout out Crawford's dispositions. And judging that the royalists were only defending the line of the A31, looking in one direction, Waller decided by coming at the town from the other direction, from the northwest, he could attack the town. And so he mustered his forces in Farnham Park at 7 o'clock in the evening on the 12th of December. Now, he used this opportunity to once again address the London train bands, who are once again mutinous. And he thanks them for their service. They've been in the field for 6 months. They've done all that has been asked of them, but he does allow them the chance to leave on the proviso that if they stayed, they could regain the honour lost at Basing. And so they're allowed to go into the town, bring in supplies, say goodbye to any loved ones within the town, and almost to a man, they return to the colours. So 12 o'clock 12 o'clock midnight on the 13th of December. Waller marches west and 2 miles at Ushot. He changes direction at Ushot to mislead any royalist scouts, any royalist pickets out watching Farnham. At 1 o'clock, he's marching through fields cross country, roughly parallel to the A287 to Alton, and the news books and the accounts of the battle do say that there is a heavy frost masking the sound of their advance as well. What Waller has also done in the previous day, he has sent out pioneers ahead of his line, cut holes through hedges, cut down any woodland that's going to impede his approach to Alton, and so he's going to have a clear run straight through to the town. So if we look at the Parliamentarian order of battle, they've got about 5,500 infantry, 500 dragoons, and 500 cavalry, and an artillery train of around 3 pieces. So a small artillery train. It's definitely a raiding force. But if we look at it as well, most of those regiments are up to their full strength. They're pretty much based around the London train bands as well. There is a cohesion of command right there. It is an organised force, and their field words, the password that they're going to identify friend from foe on the battlefield, is going to be truth and victory. In comparison, the Royalist Army of the West was depleted from the previous summer. It's very much an army of detachments. It's pieced together. Certainly, there's no synergy of identity in terms of regiments. They've been drawn from various garrisons, from Reading, Oxford, Abingdon, and Wallingford, and certainly accounts from the days before the storming of the town suggest there may well have been some bad blood between those soldiers in the army that were Welsh and the rest of the soldiers as well. It's going to be an emerging theme of Civil War battles that large amounts of soldiers did mistake Welsh soldiers for Irish soldiers. Obviously, there's long memories of the Irish Rebellion going on in 1640 and 1641 as well. There's a bit of mistrust between soldiers as well. But the garrison largely is numbering about 1,600 men, which is a sizable amount, and they've got a force of about 500 cavalry as well. And their field word on the battlefield is going to be Charles. So the garrison wakes up at 9 o'clock in the morning to find that Waller has arrayed himself before the town. They've not been expecting this, apart from the intelligence that Hopton has said the previous day. He arrives to the west of Alton, and he immediately takes 6 of Crawford's sentries prisoner. Now, one sentry did manage to get back to Crawford in the centre of the town, and he, mustering his horse, tried to retreat off to the west, but found his way blocked by Parliamentarian cavalry under Sir Arthur Heselrigg. A running battle ensued down Lenton Street to Market Street. As you can see, although much of the housing there is modern, it will follow the 17th century street pattern. It is quite a narrow street to get down. And certainly, if you're trying to array a regiment of cavalry down it, you're going to have trouble moving there as well. The sound down there, would have been, absolutely horrendous. Muskets firing, swords clattering off armour. It would have been, a very nasty place, very small place indeed as well. Crawford, in the process, loses about 200 men. Whether they're captured or whether they're killed outright, we don't really know. None of the accounts make this clear. But he does manage to get away from Haselrig, escapes to Winchester, and it gives Hopton the sad news, a little possibility of the relieving of the rest. He leaves the command of the garrison in the hands of Colonel Richard Bowles. Meanwhile, Waller's, Haselrig's, and Springate's Kentish redcoats attacked from the west across the Greenfields estate and the Flood Meadows as well, heading up towards where the library is today. Then their first port of call was Amory Hill Farm, which the garrison had settled themselves in, and they were sniping the Parliamentarian line as they went past. Now, initially, the Parliamentarian attackers were repulsed, and it was only at the bringing up of their artillery train, the lever guns, that we're going to talk about in a minute, that forced the garrison out. They fire partridge shot into the house, possibly set light to the roof, and the people that are in the house are forced back to the safety of St. Lawrence Churchyard. Now, what are lever guns? They've been developed for the Swedish Army as basically a regimental support weapon. Basically, it's slats of iron, okay, that are bound together with leather bands. The leather is shrunken, and that holds the barrel together. So it's a cheap way of making an artillery piece. Sometimes they've got one barrel, sometimes they've got two, and they would fire a 1 or 2 pound shot. More likely, they're again going to use a partridge shot to act as very much a small shotgun, basically. But Waller has used these to attack Alton, because if he brings anything bigger, anything like a saker or a mortar to bombard the town, he's going to have trouble getting it through that rough country again as well. Remember as well that his army is still being resupplied from the previous summer. He'd lost his entire artillery train at Roundway Down. It's taking time to resupply that train as well. So lever guns is his only real option. Meanwhile, the London train bands and Colonel Samuel Jones's Farnham Greencoats, the garrison of Farnham Castle, advanced along the other end of Lenton Lane. And isolated, the remaining garrison retreated into St. Lawrence Churchyard, commanded by Colonel Richard Bowles. So we've been running volleys, a firefight down that street again. And as you can see, very, very narrow indeed. They may well have even been forced back by Pusher Pike, but a very narrow place, okay, to try and deploy large amounts of troops as well. Now, an interlude at the moment. The hero of the battle, if there is any, has to be Colonel Richard Bowles. Now, he's born in 1595. By 1624, he had enlisted as an ensign in Sir Peregrine Bertie's regiment in the Netherlands. He sees action at the attack on Cadiz. He's putting down the rebels in Ireland during the landed settlement there. He serves under the Duke of Buckingham at La Rochelle, and it's only in 1630 that he gets wounded and he returns back to England. In 1640, he re-enlists in Paget's regiment, serves in the Bishop's Wars, fights at Newburn Ford on the Scots borders, and going forward into the Civil War, will fight at Edgehill, at the Siege of Reading and Bristol and Gloucester, and also at the Battle of Newbury as well. So he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. He's an old war dog, basically. So the garrison has now been forced back into the churchyard around St. Lawrence Church. And Waller's regiment heads straight for them, assailing the hornwork to the north, while the Green Regiment of the Westminster London train bands came around the flank for the southeast gate of the churchyard and forced the Royalists out under the smoke from the burning roof of Amory Hill Farm. Now, a firefight continues around the church for around 2 hours, and by this point, the garrison have fully ensconced themselves through in the church. They've smashed out the windows. They're firing from inside the church as well, and there would have been a pool of smoke. The roof of Amory Hill Farm may well have been thatched, so yellow smoke covering that battlefield as well. You wouldn't have been able to see, more than 10, 20 yards in front of you as well. So it's become a bit of a fort right in the middle of the town as well. Now, by 11 o'clock, the garrison were finally forced back, possibly again at Pusher Pike, from the church wall. One account says, suggesting that there has been more of a firefight going on, that the garrison have left their muskets sticking above the parapet to confuse the parliamentarian attackers, thinking that they're possibly still defending that church wall as well. Now, one of the main accounts for the battle is written by Lieutenant Ilias Archer, and he served within the Green Regiment of the London Train Bands, and he says, "We consulted among ourselves to enter 2 or 3 files of musketeers, promising Richard Guy, one of the captain's sergeants, to follow him if he would lead them. Whereupon he advanced, and coming within the churchyard door and seeing most of the cavaliers firing at our men, looked behind him. And there was only one musketeer with him." So whether that's, that's an account of the rate of fire coming out from that church, or simply that the storming party was too cowardly to follow him in, take your pick. Okay, it's completely up to you. Firefight continues around the church until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whereupon the parliamentarians start throwing grenades through the windows hoping to clear the defenders out of the church as well. Lieutenant Archer says again that the churchyard was full of our men, laying about them stoutly with halberts, swords, and musket stocks, while some of them threw hand grenades in at the church windows. And during this period, about 10 to 12 get killed in the churchyard. Whether they're from the attacking parliamentarian force or whether it's from the garrison, we don't really know. Certainly, some of the later antiquarian archaeology that's been done around the church did uncover evidence of this fighting quite clearly to the north of the churchyard. At this point, Sergeant Major Schambrook forced open the main doors, and Archer calls him a man whose worth and valour envy cannot stain. But he's immediately shot in the thigh. Lieutenant Archer again, and coming in a disorderly manner to the southwest corner of the church, with their pikes in the rear, their front was forced back on their own pikes, which hurt and wounded many of the men and break the pikes in pieces. And so naturally, okay, the parliamentarian storming party has now resorted to push of pike, levelling their pikes at the defenders and basically going into a rugby scrum to try and force them out from that doorway. As I said, the crush would have been so thick, okay, that those getting wounded or killed would have been held up by the crush of pike staves left, right, and centre. It would have been a bloody place in a very, very small place indeed. Amongst those storming the church is Colonel Birch of Hazelrigg's regiment. We've talked about him before. He's wounded from a dry blow from a musket butt. He basically gets smacked in the face with the back end of a musket. Something to certainly ruin your day. Gradually, the parliamentarians forced the garrison back into the nave of the church, and there seems to have been a lull in the fighting here as well, because Archer mentions, okay, that the Royalist garrison was now firing from behind a barricade of their dead as well. All this while, Colonel Bowles is standing up in the pulpit. The pulpit that's there today is contemporary to the time of the siege. He's giving orders and he's shouting out to his men, God damn his soul if he did not run his sword through him, which first called for quarter. Sometime around 2:30 in the afternoon, Bowles was killed. Certainly he had about 7 enemies around him. Whether he's killed by a shot through the pulpit, I think that's got a bit of a biblical precedent to it, to be honest. There's no evidence to suggest that on the modern pulpit there's no mark to show that it's been shot through. It's quite possible that someone has caught him from behind, has either smacked him over the head with a musket butt or with a halberd as well. But he is certainly killed. And just to emphasize that biblical precedent that the news books seem to be taking, he is said to have had 15 pieces of silver in his pocket that they've looted off him later on. Charles I, on hearing of the death of Bowles, showing how high regard he is regarded within the Royalist army, the king is supposed to have said, "Bring on me my mourning scarf. I've lost one of the best commanders in this kingdom." So, with Bowles' death, fighting gradually receded, and the garrison, the defenders, the survivors that were remaining, they do request quarter, and that would have been around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Between 50 and 60 of the Royalist defenders of the town do get killed, so not a large amount, but 875 are taken prisoner, including anywhere between 37 and 60 officers. There's a big disparity in numbers between those that actually fought at the battle, so the likes of Archer, and what is reported in the news books as well. Of that number, though, about 500 do change sides, and there is accounts of the chances of a bloodbath spreading from the parliamentarian attackers to those who survived in the church, because the attackers believe that the defenders, large amounts of them, may well have been Irish as well. Again, okay, it's highly unlikely. Looking at the Royalist army list for 1643 and the regimental list, there is no possibility that Bowles could have had Irish troops within his army. Rather, they would have been Welsh troops that had been taken from the Welsh border in and amongst Astley's regiment of foot, and also the garrison of Reading as well. And just to emphasize, how angsty it could have gone, Archer does say, "We came in upon them and might have put them all to the sword, and much ado there was to keep our men from cutting them in pieces. Could they have known the Irish, and that they that come out of Ireland, they had a great mind to have cut them in pieces, and as turncoats." Prisoners were immediately put to burying the bodies near the north wall of the church. And after that, they would have been put to slighting the defences around the church as well, either pulling them down, undercutting them, or if they couldn't be destroyed, blowing them up as well. Afterwards, the prisoners were marched to Farnham in files of two, chained together, stored in Farnham Church, and then in the coming days, they were paraded through the streets of London as well on Waller's Victory Parade. One of the fantastic things about the Civil War is that they've recorded pretty much everything. And surviving within Privy Council minutes, we do have claims made after the Civil War in 1660 for parliamentarian soldiers trying to get pensions for wounds inflicted during the battle. They can be divided very much into two parts. If we look at the rank and file, soldiers who lost an arm or lost a hand and right arm, probably during that close hand-to-hand fighting, trying to get into the church, you're not going to get anything. If you're of the rank and file, chances of you getting a pension are pretty low. On the other hand, if you're an officer, and certainly this officer, this lieutenant in Hazelrigg's horse, who does get wounded by a pike, possibly as he's been chasing Crawford's horse back along Lenton Lane, he does get an award of £20 and a coat of grey cloth for good measure as well. In terms of the people within the town whose houses and livelihoods get destroyed as a result of the fighting, they're not going to get anything good at all. They get a letter from Parliament basically saying you did well, you served us gratefully, but they're not going to get a pension off them as well. Stark reminder of the cost of civil war.